Getting new information now. We're learning that the former student suspected of opening fire in a Florida high school today may have been identified as a potential threat to fellow students in the past. That, according to a former teacher who said 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz wasn't allowed on campus with a backpack on him. One student also told a local news station that, quote, everyone predicted the shooting. An Instagram page apparently belonging to Cruz showed pictures of guns and knives. Joining me now is Cliff May, president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Well, let's defend the democracy in which we live right now, Cliff. I mean, there clearly was not sufficient communication between those who knew that this guy was a threat.
I think that's true, and I think we've seen that in other examples. Let me just say, look, I don't do everything. I'm not an expert in everything. I do national security and foreign policy. But what occurred to me today, Israel is threatened by terrorists, and when a terrorist incident succeeds, it gets a lot of publicity. But actually, they don't succeed that often in Israel statistically. And there's two reasons. One is Israel has a security barrier, some call it a wall, to keep out people who want to kill Israelis. And second, everybody in Israel serves in the military. And if you go around the street, you will see people, military and ex-military, carrying weapons in a way you don't see in most other countries. And there's also a lot of people carrying concealed. So when a terrorist attacks, there's usually somebody nearby who has a weapon, knows how to use a weapon, and is not afraid to use that weapon to stop the terrorists. It's something to think about.
There's also, though, in Israel, of course, it's a lot smaller, and people would focus on the geographical details, but there is a social fabric there. There is a determination on the part of Israelis, recognition that survival just hangs by a thread there. They're surrounded by their enemies. And as you say, everybody's forced to serve in the military, whether you're man, woman. And that social fabric has a lot to do with the fact that you can't get away with a lot. You try to do anything, including fly to Israel on El Al, and you realize very quickly that everybody's going to say something if there's anything suspicious.
And there's another part to that Israeli security people have told me, that in America, our people look for weapons. In Israel, they look for terrorists. There's a difference.
Absolutely. Now, there is one thing about America that I gotta stand up after criticizing our social fabric. Every time you think that the social fabric has had enough and it's just going to be torn to pieces and it'll never recover, we find a way of recovery. We find a way of re-energizing ourselves, recommitting ourselves to the founding principles. And I hate to keep coming back to New York. I know a lot of people out there don't like this city, but there was a time in the late 80s, early 90s, when everybody thought the social fabric of New York was impossible to retrieve, impossible to sew back together. We managed to do it. And as a result of that tremendous effort, made first by Rudy Giuliani and then by successive police chiefs and so forth, we managed to keep this city alive. It may fall again, but the same may be true nationally. Just as we think it's the darkest hour, it's just before the dawn.
Well, you're right. I lived in New York. I saw that. I lived there as a kid. I saw what the streets look like. I saw what Rudy Giuliani managed to do. And yes, there are ways to recover. And I certainly hope we can, because the social fabric is frayed and we need recovery.
Cliff May, good to see you, my friend. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Appreciate it.